They said my marriage was over before I even reached the door. The taxi pulled up to a house I no longer recognized as fully mine, and my hands were shaking before I even touched the gate. 4 years. 4 years of desert heat, missed birthdays, and a marriage that had cracked wide open the night I walked out after the worst fight of my life. My name is Malik Renner, and I was returning from an overseas contracting assignment with divorce papers folded neatly in my bag, certain that whatever waited behind that door had already died a long time ago. If you believe people deserve second chances, and that love can survive even the ugliest fights, hit like on this video, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Heartbeat Tales so you never miss a story like this one. 4 years earlier, my wife Ophelia and I had screamed at each other in a kitchen that still smelled like the dinner she'd cooked for our anniversary. I had just signed a contract to work overseas, a decision I made without asking her, without even warning her, because I was angry and scared and too proud to admit either. She stood there with tears streaming down her face, asking how I could choose a job over the life we were building, and I told her, cruelly, coldly, that maybe we weren't building anything worth staying for. I left the next morning before sunrise. I told myself it was for the money, for our future, but really, I was running from a conversation I didn't know how to have. The first year overseas was brutal in ways I hadn't expected. Not the labor, not the heat, but the silence. Ophelia's calls grew shorter, then stopped altogether by month 8. I told myself I didn't care. I told my coworkers she'd probably moved on, found someone easier to love, someone who didn't disappear when things got hard. I built a wall around that wound and let it fester into resentment. By year 2, I convinced myself the marriage was already over in every way that mattered, and I was just waiting out the contract to make it official. But some nights, especially the quiet ones under a sky full of unfamiliar stars, I would remember the way Ophelia used to hum while she cooked, off-key and unbothered, or how she'd leave little notes in my work bag before I even had this job, notes that said things like, "You are stronger than you think," on days she somehow knew I needed to hear it. Those memories didn't fit the story I was telling myself. So I buried them deeper, focused on the money, focused on the end date circled in red on my calendar, and told myself that closure was coming, one way or another. By the 3rd year, letters started arriving instead of calls, slower, more deliberate, written in Ophelia's careful handwriting. She never mentioned divorce. She wrote about the garden she'd started, about her mother's declining health, about small ordinary things, as if she were leaving a trail of breadcrumbs back to a door she hoped I'd still want to walk through. I read every letter twice, then wrote back short, guarded replies, still gripping the anger like a shield, still unwilling to ask myself the harder question, was I actually ready to lose her, or was I just too afraid to find out what 4 years of silence had really cost us both? The contract ended on a humid Tuesday afternoon, and I signed the last of my paperwork with a strange hollowness in my chest, the divorce papers already drafted by a lawyer back home, waiting in my bag like a verdict I'd already decided. On the long flight back, I rehearsed the words I would say, the calm, final speech about how we'd grown apart, how staying together out of guilt would only hurt us more. I told myself I was doing the responsible thing, the mature thing, ending it with dignity instead of dragging out a slow, painful death. When the taxi finally stopped outside our house, I noticed the porch light was on, even though it was only mid-afternoon, glowing faintly against the daylight like someone had forgotten to turn it off, or maybe like someone had left it on for exactly this moment. My hand hovered over the door handle for a long time before I finally pushed it open, bracing myself for an empty house, or worse, evidence that Ophelia had already moved on without me. Instead, I stepped into a living room filled with soft afternoon light, and there, propped against the wall, were dozens of photographs I didn't remember taking, photos of us from before I left, framed and arranged with obvious care, tracing the entire arc of our relationship from our first clumsy date to our wedding day. On the coffee table sat a worn journal, and beside it, a small wooden box I recognized instantly, the one I'd given her on our first anniversary, the one she used to keep her most treasured letters in. My chest tightened as I opened the journal with trembling hands, and page after page revealed 4 years of entries, not about anger or heartbreak, but about hope. She had written about praying for me during storms overseas she'd heard about on the news, about defending our marriage to relatives who told her to move on, about a promise she made to herself that no matter how long it took, she would still be standing at that door when I returned, ready to talk, not to fight. Then I heard footsteps, and Ophelia appeared in the doorway from the kitchen, older in the gentlest way, her eyes glassy with tears she was clearly trying to hold back. She didn't run to me, and she didn't yell. She simply said, I never stopped choosing you, even on the days it would have been easier not to. In that moment, the divorce papers in my bag felt like they belonged to a stranger, someone who had never known the woman standing in front of me, someone who had let bitterness write a story that was never actually true. We talked for hours that evening, really talked, for the first time in years, unpacking every wound, every silence, every assumption we'd both made in the dark. It wasn't a fairy tale ending wrapped in a neat bow, it was harder than that, messier, full of tears and long pauses and honest apologies neither of us had been brave enough to offer before. But somewhere in that conversation, I realized the marriage I thought had died overseas had actually been waiting patiently at home the entire time, kept alive by a woman who refused to give up on us even when I nearly had. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that love can outlast even the longest silences. And before we go, if you believe Ophelia's patience deserved this ending, type "second chances" in the comments below. I'd love to see how many of you believe love like hers still exists in this world.